10 critical questions. Every voter must ask any governorship candidate before voting. Somewhere right now, a man is standing on a stage. He is smiling. He is confident. He is promising you roads, hospitals, jobs, a better life. But behind him, there is a number he is not telling you, a number that could decide whether your salary gets paid this month, whether your hospital has electricity, whether your child's school stays open. That number is called a budget. And in the next 12 minutes, we are going to show you exactly what to ask before you hand that man or that woman the keys to your state. The price of power. Every election season, candidates walk into our communities with the same promises: roads, security, jobs, development. But promises are cheap. Budgets are not. Somewhere between the campaign stage and the government house, there is a document, often ignored, rarely questioned, that determines whether any of those promises can actually survive contact with reality. It's called fiscal policy, and most voters never ask about it. We're changing that today. This is not a lecture. This is a survival guide. 10 questions built from real state economic data that every voter deserves to ask before they cast a vote. Stay with us until the end, because question 10 is the one most candidates hope you never think to ask. Let's begin. Question 1. Is the budget honest or is it fiction? Every year, state governments publish a budget, a number, a promise on paper. But here's what most people don't know. Global best practice, backed by the World Bank, the IMF, says a budget that can actually drive growth should be at least 20 to 30% of a state's entire GDP. Below that threshold, something dangerous happens. Too many people chasing too few resources. Struggle, insecurity, unemployment. A government that simply cannot deliver. So the first question is simple but merciless. Candidate, what is your budget size relative to our state's GDP? And can you prove the numbers in it are real? Because a budget can be padded, inflated, filled with projects that exist only on paper. Ask for the audit trail. Ask who verifies the numbers. A leader who cannot answer this has already told you everything you need to know. Question 2, where is the money actually coming from? A budget is just a wish list until you know how it's funded. Every naira in a state budget comes from one of 4 places: internally generated revenue, federal allocations, borrowed debt, or aiding grants. The ratio between these tells you everything about a state's independence and its risk. A state that funds itself mostly through debt is not being led. It is being financed on borrowed time. So ask, where specifically will the funding for your promises come from? And how much of it is money we don't actually have yet? Question 3, is this a growth plan or just a spreadsheet? Here is the distinction that separates a real leader from a paper pusher. A budget can be a mere statement of estimates, numbers in, numbers out, nothing built. Or it can be a genuine development strategy engineered to create jobs, attract investment, and grow the economy year over year. Ask the candidate to show you the difference. Ask, what does this spending actually build? And how will we measure whether it worked? If they can't answer in specifics, they don't have a plan, they have a slogan. Now that you understand the budget itself, it's time to look at the debt behind it. Because what we're about to show you, using real state economic data, will change the way you watch every campaign speech for the rest of your life. Stay with us. Let's look at real numbers, not hypothetical. Real, in one Nigerian state, total revenue in a single year reached over 87 billion naira. Sounds like a lot, but after operating expenses and loan repayments, what was left for actual development? For roads, hospitals, schools? Just 8.15 billion naira, barely 10% of total revenue, 10% to build an entire state's future. Question 4, what happens to development when debt eats the budget? If a governor inherits a state where 90% of revenue is already spoken for before a single road is paved, how exactly did they deliver on campaign promises? This is not a hypothetical. This is the fiscal reality in state after state across the country. So ask directly, with this little room to maneuver, what is your actual plan to fund development? And what will you cut to make it possible? If the answer is vague, you already know what 4 years will look like. Question 5. How deep is the debt? And who is really paying for it? Now here's where it gets serious. In that same state, the debt-to-revenue ratio hit 205%. Debt servicing alone consumed nearly 160% of the state's independent revenue. In another state we examined, the numbers were even worse. A debt-to-revenue ratio of 234%, with debt servicing eating up over 100% of internally generated revenue. Think about what that means. The money coming in isn't enough to cover the debt going out, not even close. Ask the candidate, what is our state's current debt-to-revenue ratio? And if it's already this high, who would even lend to us next? Because at some point, the lenders stop answering the phone. Question 6. Have we already crossed the point of no return? There is an internationally recognized debt sustainability ceiling, 125% of revenue. Beyond that line, a government is considered fiscally unsustainable. We just showed you states sitting at 205%, at 234%, not close to the line, nearly double it. So the question becomes existential. If we've already blown past the sustainability ceiling, how do you plan to govern, pay salaries, fund security, build anything, without pushing us further into the hole? This is the moment where most candidates change the subject. Don't let them, because if debt is already choking the budget, what happens to the things that actually keep people alive? Security, salaries, pensions, that's next. And it gets personal. Numbers on a page are easy to ignore until they become a soldier who can't get fuel for patrol, a teacher who hasn't been paid in 3 months, a pensioner, decades of service behind them, waiting on a payment that never comes. This is where fiscal policy stops being abstract and starts being personal. Question 7. Can you actually keep us safe? With less than 10% of total revenue left after debt and operating costs, ask the hardest question of all: how will you fund real security against insecurity, banditry, and unrest when there is almost nothing left in the account? Security is not cheap. It never has been. A candidate who promises safety without explaining how they'll pay for it is not offering protection. They're offering a slogan with a uniform on it. Question 8. Will our civil servants and pensioners actually get paid? In the states we examined, tens of thousands of civil servants and pensioners depend on a government that is already fiscally stretched to its limit. So ask, without blinking, with this fiscal position, can you guarantee, not promise, guarantee, that salaries and pensions will be paid on time, every time? Because when a government misses payroll, it doesn't just lose money, it loses the trust of the people who kept it running. Question 9. Are we walking into a debt spiral, one we can never escape? Here is the nightmare scenario economists warn about. A state so deep in debt that it borrows just to service old debt. Revenue stops funding development entirely and instead feeds an endless cycle of repayment. Economists call this a debt spiral. And once a government is trapped inside it, there is often no way out without painful, generational sacrifice. Ask, what safeguards will you put in place to make sure we don't fall into a debt spiral that our children will still be paying for? If they don't have an answer, you're not electing a governor, you're electing a debt collector. Question 10. What is the actual plan to get us out? This is the question that separates leaders from campaigners. Does the candidate have a real debt repayment strategy? Structured amortization? A sinking fund set aside specifically for debt retirement? Without starving the state of funds for infrastructure and welfare? And beyond debt repayment, what is their plan for fiscal efficiency? Cutting wasteful overhead, closing revenue leakages, making every naira collected actually count. Ask them directly. Show us your repayment plan. Show us your efficiency plan. Not a promise, a plan. If they can answer this question with real numbers, real timelines, and real accountability, you may be looking at someone worth trusting with your state's future. If they can't, you already have your answer. 10 questions. That's all it takes to separate a leader from a campaign performance. Not questions about promises, Questions about numbers, because numbers don't lie, don't spin, and don't change once the votes are counted. We are not telling you who to vote for. We are telling you what to ask before the rallies end, before the ballots are cast, before another 4 years are handed to someone who may not have a plan beyond the stage they're standing on. So here is our challenge to you. The next time a candidate comes to your community, don't ask them what they'll build. Ask them how they'll pay for it. Ask them about the budget, about the debt, about the ratio between what comes in and what goes out. Because a state is not run on charisma. It is run on cash flow. And the leaders who understand that are the ones who actually deliver. If this documentary opened your eyes, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone about to vote, send it to a group chat, post it before Election Day. Because the next governor's fiscal decisions won't just affect the next 4 years. They'll affect the next generation. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this before every election. Comment below, which of these 10 questions would you ask first? And when you're done here, go ask your candidate, because the price of power should never be paid by the people who didn't get a say in it. The price of power, ask before you vote.